Hello, welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's early Saturday morning, and I'm going to strip this Turbo 400 transmission. A friend of mine dropped it off 4 weeks ago now at least. He actually pressure washed and delivered 4 transmissions, and this particular one he wants back, rebuilt. He's hoping it's a TH475. It was a brake drum transmission, which he has removed, and he pressure washed everything. He removed the pan afterwards to try to get all the water out. Pressure washing a transmission, it's almost impossible not to get water in the vent, in through the pump. But we'll see. Hopefully the water, if it's been sitting there for a month, hasn't really hurt anything. A month is probably a minimum estimate. Could be 5 or 6 weeks. That's a state of the address is how far behind I am. But today we're going to take it apart. Now it's an 1983 FI tagged transmission. And I don't have, when I go online, I can't find 83 FI, but I find subsequent years is a P30 chassis. As I've mentioned, just because you have a brake drum doesn't make it a TH475. It would have had to be in a 19.5 wheel equipped 14,000 GVW. That's my experience, and that's what I see online when I look at all the listings of all the codes. Anytime it says TH475, it says 14,000 GVW. And I know that's 19.5 wheels because I had a motorhome and I wanted to haul with it. So I was interested in the gross vehicle weight rating. So I'm going to set up, and you're over there, so you shouldn't vibrate too much. Unlike when I had you on the bench with my other tripod. I'm still getting used to this tripod. It has some features I like and some features not so much. So I'll just ramble on as I'm taking it apart, and let's see what's inside. All right, here we go. You get to stare at my belly. The transmission's the star, not me. So let's see what we got under the pan. You never know. I'll leave that one there. I'm not going to go too fast today. The whole job doesn't take that long, so I do appreciate him putting the effort into cleaning stuff out before I got it. That's really nice looking. Pretty rare if you ask me, because usually they're a horror show. Usually a clue, if anybody's been in here, as to how many O-rings on the case side of the filter pickup. It only has one, so she might be original. Unplug that. I like to go around while I have a 1/2-inch socket on my gun. I don't want to block you, but I just got to get in here for a second. Getting the governor out of there. Smells good. Sometimes transmission fluid can have a good smell. Okay, there's no governor in the hole. He must have borrowed that for something else. I did build him another transmission that he sheared the governor gear off. Maybe he took it out of this one. When he watches the video, he'll probably tell me, oh yeah, there's no governor in there. Modulator's been out before too. Interesting. Old crusty O-ring. That'll go right in this wrap bin. And again, while they have the 1/2-inch, let's just go ahead and take the pump bolt out. I don't do that many transmission stripping videos, but sometimes I set up the camera, film the whole thing. I'm busy over here working, I get done, and there's no footage. That happens. I'm just getting the sealing washers off the pump. That one's stuck pretty good. Guess we'll get it later. Alright, back to the valve body. I always look at the case, make sure it's not broken. I always try to angle the transmission so when the oil comes flowing out, it's Most of it's going to hit my bucket. I have the bolt for the filter, but I don't have the spacer. There's a spacer missing. That'll happen. Now for the valve body, I always like to get the short ones first because the old guy told me way back in the day that they could bend with the spring pressure there. I've said it before. Probably say it every time I take one off. Because I think about him while I'm doing it. So he can rest assured that he taught me something. It is nice and clean. I'm just throwing my parts in a parts tote. It's actually a deep fryer. Again, working away, I know the spring pressure's here, so I'll leave that bolt for last. It should pop up if the spring's good, like that. And we just kind of pry right under here. Get the governor tubes out. I see water coming out a little bit. Again, hard to avoid. I'll put the valve body upside down to drain. These little bolts here are 3/8 headed. The only thing in the transmission that is, and when you reassemble the valve body, you put these on loose, assemble the whole valve body, you always got to remember to go back and retighten those. I have to train myself to, before I put the pan on, to make sure I did that. Because if you leave this loose, you're going to know it. Nothing broken there. I like it when the case valve body gasket comes off in one piece. This one has been exposed to water, so we'll see. When they get a little water on them, it just kind of come off like a potato chip. So that's a bummer. But it's okay, we'll just dig out for the center support bolt. And maybe one round in the parts washer will help it out. Taking out the check balls, 4, 5, 6. It still had all 6, another indication probably has not been rebuilt. Because one of them you could throw away every time. Huh. Gasket is stuck. So let's just dig out for the bolt. And there's definitely water in there. That's a bummer. And brake said bolt loose. I like to use a ratchet. Make sure I don't hurt the case or anything. There we go. Nice and tight. Hands are slippery. Can't imagine why. Center support bolt out. Get the servo while I'm here. Again, spring loaded, so I like to kind of back them all off. Pull down on it. Not huge pressure, but why strain it? And this always has a ton of oil in it. And if there's debris in your transmission, which there always is, it's going to be laying right there. All looks pretty normal. And while we're right here, because we will be removing all the linkage to replace the seal for the linkage, might as well take this off too. The correct position for the parking pawl spring is the coil over the case is going to go forward, and it's going to go underneath the pawl itself. It'll fit either way, but if you take one apart that's never been apart before, that's the way GM put them in. You actually got to work to get it out of there, out behind the pawl. All right, stand her up. Here comes the oil. Go a little beyond straight up and down, let it drain a little bit. Good enough. Now let's see how bad the pump is stuck in there. I always forget to wind this back open again. I bought this online, eBay. It was cheap. It will bend if the pump offers any resistance. So I just kind of put a little strain on it and see if she's going to give up. And it won't, so I'll give it a little assistance right there. Now we're free. And usually I can grab it, pull the whole thing out. And remind me, before we finish, to take the pump apart to see how that fed as well. It has Teflon seals in the back of the pump, which is good. Again, the water in the gaskets has a reaction, and the pump gasket's stuck too. Forward drum, again, we'll spin around eventually, take this all apart. Right now we'll just get the parts out of the transmission. The direct drum I like to grab with my hook. Just pick up on it a little bit. It's a quiet, it's going to be probably a 16 element, but it does have a round back drum. I can guarantee it already because it's quiet, it doesn't go squeak squeak. Also has potentially a 6 clutch direct drum. Get the band out of here. That's been used before, not necessarily wore out, but it's been used, you know, heavy duty application, going down a big hill. They probably use some engine braking. In a passenger car, you seldom see anywhere. Now to get my snap rings out, I like to tilt it a little bit. The snap rings tend to migrate down this way, which makes them more difficult to get out. So again, my choices of tools is that angled pick and a screwdriver with a notch ground in it. Back in high school. Craftsman, still going. The intermediate snap ring is so wimpy, doesn't take a lot of force to get it out of there. Intermediate clutch is coming out. And just average condition, they're not smoked. They're not new. They're just there. It does not have a wave plate. Just got 3 thick steels, 3 intermediate clutches, and the pressure plate. And that's my stomach growling because we haven't had breakfast. It has steel pistons, at least in the intermediate. We haven't got the other ones apart yet. And once again, the bevel snap ring has migrated down to about 8 o'clock. So we'll do the same trick. Try to release it from its home. A little upward stress and a few flicks of the screwdriver. Get the little boy on out of there. Just like that. Now we have speedometer. Never forget the speedometer because, well, if you leave that in there, you're gonna break off the gear, and then you're gonna be looking for a gear. So I remind myself, doesn't matter how many you do, I remind myself every time to not forget the things that are gonna trip me up. The governor and the speedometer need to come out. Or you're gonna break the gears on the way out. My lifting tool, I have 2 of them. David Nod had sent me one too, has a handle, hooks around the main shaft. I use that on aftermarket main shafts because of the way they're built. This doesn't fit as well, but in this case, this is the first one I grabbed. And if you're interested in the Kent Moore tools, the part numbers are in the ATSG manual. So what I like about the lifting tool is you can just now pick the whole lower unit out. Just like that. And the fretting ring, which you'll find on all transmissions about, I don't know, early 70s and up. The center support sits on that in the case. It's only there so the center support doesn't wear into the case. The band, I just grab it opposite where it locks in. Give it a little tug. It is in fine shape, which always makes me happy because I prefer to reuse it than to put an aftermarket one in there. I mean, the aftermarket ones work, but the original one is better. And pull the thrust washer and the selective spacer out of the back of the case. And with the exception of getting out the linkage, you know, removing the nail and the nut, we'll do that afterwards. Strip it. I knock carefully the electrical pass-through out. You put a 3/4 wrench around the 3 little tabs and squish them in at the same time. I tap it a little bit first to get it moving, and then use the wrench trick to squeeze them in. Most of the time, they come right out. Sometimes they don't. Also, don't want to forget the valve body gasket's blocking it, but the modulator valve is a lot easier to remove, and you can see the passages. But you can also use a magnet. To assist you. Despite the water, it's still loose in its bore, so that's a good thing. So, how many bolts we got in the case? Bingo! We have an 8-bolt case. I hope you can see it. We got one there, we got one there. So far, we have the round back direct drum, which we can upgrade to the 34 element sprag. We have an 8-bolt case. It's not marked HD, but it does have the imprints where the large M10 1.5 bolts would be for the aluminum cover. It has the bosses, they're just not tapped. So this case could just as well say HD, and that's all HD means, is it has the ability for the aluminum bolt-on cover that would have had rods down from the motor mounts to help support the transfer case hanging on the back. That is what the HD is for. It means nothing on the inside. This transmission has better parts inside than your average TH400 only because it was in heavy duty applications. It was at least in a P30, we just don't know the GVW. So let's take apart the lower unit and find out. I'm gonna move you, so hang right on. All right, let's strip the last few pieces. Once again, the water has gotten to the pump gasket and that is stuck on there as well. So that'll be lots of scrapey. It does have the Teflon seals. Move that out of your way, which allows the thrust washer, selective, to fall off. When you have the metal rings, that will not fall off. No big deal, just something to be aware of. If you're looking for it, it's probably on the ground somewhere. So there's 5 unique, well, there's a long, 2 mediums, and 2 shorts to hold the pump together. 1/2 inch. I just hold the 2 halves together. Take them off in a crisscross pattern. let it drop down. These bolts are not like any other bolts in the transmission, but the long ones will kind of look like a valve body bolt, but they're not. So be aware, just you need to keep them separate. I'll look for them. Always go first impressions on what you see. If there's wear on the pump, it's going to be here for one. And this looks grimy, but nice. A little bit of water in the bottom there. Again, it's almost impossible not to. Nothing really out of place there. The bushings look good. So again, after that's cleaned, we'll get a better look at it. Pump gears look fine so far. I was recently chastised by a viewer that I didn't, mic everything as I took it apart. I said, well, in 100 videos, we've covered wear and whatnot. Now this one's dot down and dot up. You find them in different ways. When you have a new set of gears, there's no dot on the big gear. These are probably 0.727 wide. That's the most popular ones. They make thinner ones if you have to cut either side or this side. Cutting that side wouldn't matter. When you change this depth, you would need different depth gears, but the bushing's wiped, which is getting replaced every time anyway. This does have the channel to collect water because it's, in the 80s. We're getting smarter by then. We can go ahead and chuck this out of here. Pump O-ring. Dry and brittle. I mean, it just broke taking it apart, so gives you an indication she's seen a little heat in her life. But the pump, I believe, will live another day. Nothing is jumping out saying it won't. So, excuse me while I like to keep my work area clean-ish. I know, look around. But still, at least I can concentrate on this much. And while the direct drum's right here, we'll just take a peek and count the clutches in it, see what they look like. It probably a 6 clutch unit, just by looking at the stack in there. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, well worn, but not wiped out, not smoked. No wave plate, 6 clutches. And if you take the spacer out, I always find this interesting because with a metal piston, you can change this spacer. It's probably a half or no marking to 0. So if you have a 0, you had a 6 clutch direct drum. A 5 clutch is usually a 1. And just be certain, again, water guttering a little bit right there. It'll clean off, but there's 2 half moons right here you can hook in to get the snap ring. That just holds the shield on. Pop the little shield off. It's got little teeth that, again, hold in the half moons. And it's stuck. Here we go. Yep. It's only a 16 element. Why the 16 and 34? Well, that's a mystery. And one of the shields stayed on there. So we'll just put it right back on. If you turn clockwise, it'll go right back on. It should rotate freely like a clock. If you think of a second hand on a clock, going clockwise, and it should lock this way. Move the whole drum. So that's all good news. Check the bore inside the drum. This transmission had Teflon seals its whole life, so there's no wear in the bore, where if it had steel rings, it probably would. And now, the main event. We're not going to worry about the forward, although I can tell you when I take this apart, in fact we will, it's going to be missing the center seal. I guarantee it. So I'll finish up with that, but let's get to the main event where he wants to see what he's got for gears. Again, I always check, hope you can see me. Make sure the roller clutch is working. It should freewheel left and rotate right now. Opposite of that is my stomach growling. when you lift off the center support, often it takes this sun tube with it, and it's stuck a little bit. Water's coming out. It also takes the upper bearing shield with it every time. Heavy duty transmission does have the brass thrust washer, Teflon seals. GM never dual fed anything, so it always has all 4 seals on there. Water coming out. So I'm careful not to lose all my bearings because they're gonna fall out. That's full of oil, but tipping it over, ooh, he's gonna be happy. We have straight cut gears. So I was wrong. Well, I knew it was P chassis anyway. Obviously this one is exactly what he's looking for. The spiraling that you see on the outside of the reaction carrier where the band rides is totally normal. So this looks rough, and that, other than where the water set in it a little bit, that'll clean right up. But yes, we do have straight cut gears, and that's gonna make him happy. So here's the whole upper bearing. And even no matter how many times I build a Turbo 400, I always check when I'm reassembling to make sure I have all the little bearings the right direction. Doesn't matter how many times you do it. Sun gear's in the right way. It's straight cut, as you can see. And let's double check inside the reaction carrier, but oh, it does have a silencer band. A lot of them don't. This one does. Plastic, we'll change that out. And to convert to a two-wheel drive application with a slip yoke, standard issue, this is the correct shaft. Take the O-ring off and we remove this groove right here. And I will take this all apart, but you've seen me do that a million times. So the last thing I want to do, I'm going to take the forward clutch apart. This will probably be just a 5 clutch unit. And the forward clutch is usually in good shape because it's just on the whole time. I always check, but I'm always disappointed. Nothing special. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to pop the spring out, and then I'll pull the piston out, and we'll see what we got. Let's see if I overtalked my... Also, no wave plate in the forward clutch pack either. Heavy duty. They didn't need it. All right, we're at the spring compressor. I leave it in this vise most of the time. I have it marked 2 spots. That's forward, that's direct. The direct has to go higher because it sits up on the Sprague race, so it sits higher in the press. So I put the opening towards me, compress the spring. This thing works really well. Just have to make sure you're pushing in. I don't want to bend the shield, so go down enough where you can get the snap ring out. This is not the best pair of snap ring pliers to use, but I use it anyway. Most of the time, I also put my finger on it so it doesn't go flying. Set it right there. On the way up, you have to be careful. The spring plate doesn't get caught in the groove and then surprise you when it releases. You want it needs to come on up by. And I'll just do it right here. Well, let's go back to the bench. It is one thing I like about the 4L80 transmission is the spring, return springs are captive instead of being loose. So in this case, you gotta keep track of them all. But modifying, like the direct drum, you cannot use the captive. So let's pull it out. And you can see there's no inner seal. So GM in heavy duty application wanted to use the entire piston, which is all that seal does, is separate the 2 halves of the piston. So we had no wave plate to cushion and no extra inner seal to cushion. It just went into gear. This has a number 1 spacer, which again pops right out of there. and you'll see the spacer itself has notches. They're always down, I assume, to let oil in and out. Trapped oil anyway, but the spacers go down, you just squeeze it and pop it back in there. And the piston's all the same. You can change the spacer for different clutch pack amounts. All right, I guess that's it. I probably rambled long enough. Look how nice and clean that forward drum is. Huh. I'll have to do lots of cleaning, lots of scraping, and see what level of transmission he wants in return. But he did get what he wanted. This is a straight cut unit, so TH475.